morning all. I call this 11 plus education for parents. Thank you so much for spending this time with me on a Sunday morning. But why are you here? Well, I know you've got various reasons. I know that some of you have a child on one of my programs already. I know that some of you are thinking about putting your child on one of my programs. Some of you might be here because your children are on lockdown again and you're at home with them, and mum and dad have to also be teachers and you're not, and you need a little bit of guidance on that. Well, I hope that I'll be able to help all of you, whatever your reasons for being here are, on this condition that you're here because you want to do your best for your children. So whichever specific reasons brought you here, I hope that you share this in common, that you're here because you want to do your best for your children. And if that's not why you're here, then I'm sorry, but you are in the wrong place. Then that leads us on to why I am here. Now, there is something in it for me. First of all, I believe in what I do, and I do it to the best of my ability and experience. And I like to share the insights that I've gained over essentially a lifetime in teaching and 20 years in 11 plus preparation. So when some people ask me, well, why are you here? Why are you doing this every month, one Sunday every month? Well, I'm here to share my expertise and insights with you in order to empower you to make better choices for yourselves and your children. But still people come back to me, yeah, but why? Well, my comeback is, well, why not? Why wouldn't I do that? Do you know, sometimes if I have building work done, or I'm thinking about having some repairs or some maintenance done, I think, I'm reluctant to go to a builder that I don't know because I'm afraid of being ripped off. And the same again, if I need some repair done to my car or anything like that, which I know nothing about, I'm afraid to go to the experts in case of they could be ripping me off and I wouldn't know. So I wish I had a friend in that industry, somebody who knew, who I could trust not to rip me off and just give me sound advice. Well, I'm that person when it comes to 11 plus, because I know what it's like. I mean, we all know what it's like to fear being ripped off, being given poor information, self-serving information. So I'm here to essentially be a friend to you and give you accurate information, honest information, things you actually need to know about. Now, so I'm saying, give yourself a chance. I'm going to share some important insights, or at least what I think are the most important insights. And some of them you might not like. I mean, they might sting. But I ask you to reflect on them, and I hope that your children will reap the rewards. Give it some time to sink in, just think about it. And I hope then that you'll have the opportunity to make more informed decisions and choices. Which brings me to my first video clip. I'll just play it. You are not your feelings. We all have them.
It's also important to remember that you are not your feelings. One of the most important things that you can learn from this book, and more importantly for life, is that you are not your feelings. Your feelings are there to give you an example of how you could react, but that doesn't mean you have to act in that way. So remember, you do not have to act on your feelings. When you understand that your feelings are just suggestions for how you could act in a situation and not what you have to do, you will become unstoppable.
Okay, short and simple. You are not your feelings. Now, this is a very powerful thing. The reason I want to mention this at the outset is because we are almost taught by the world to react with our feelings, and that does not necessarily serve us or the people we care about, or the world for that matter, well. And I think that if we just recognize that feelings, yes, we all have them, we all experience them, but they are events taking place in our bodies, and they are not us, and they need not define us. Now, this is actually a really important concept for helping children, because children are more prone than adults generally to allowing their feelings to make their choices, and you can help them to understand that feelings are not who they are, that they need not react with their feelings. By the way, in the clip, the narrator referred to a book, the book, and it is this book. It's called The Chimp Paradox. I'll come back to that because it's a really useful book. So why should you heed me, even if you don't like some of the things that I say? I am motivated to educate. I've been in education. I've been a teacher since 1985, and not by profit. I can tell you this, that I could be a very rich person. I am not, if I chose to be, because of the experience I have with 11 plus, but I choose not to. I'm happy just to make a living. And I could easily make a fortune if I wanted by packing in 20 kids or 12 or more kids even into a room and teaching them and pretend that I'm educating them. And you wouldn't know any different because I'm the expert, but I know the difference, and the difference matters to me. It's why I have my groups small. That is maximum of 9 in a room, 9 children in a room. And with the Zoom, it's usually 7 or 8. So I'm in a position to tell you the things you really need to know to make better choices for yourself. I'm not trying to simply line my pockets at your expense. And I think that because I'm going to, well, I'm asking you essentially to trust me, then you ought to know a little bit about me, where I'm coming from. That this is my actual name, Sir Tailor. And at the time when I started the business about 20 years ago, I thought, oh, isn't it clever to shorten Sudhir to Sir, hence Sir Tailor. And Tailor is my actual surname. I was born in Kenya. I went to India, not on my own. My family moved to India when I was about 2. And then we immigrated from India when I was about 7. So I've been living mostly in this country since the age of 7. Very importantly, I'm dad to 2 girls. I'm a parent, so a lot of what I say and what I think is from the parents' eye view. My girls, there they are. Kavita on the left is now 23, and Nilam on the right is now 26. Kavita is still at university, and Nilam is a journalist working for The Guardian. I've mentioned already, I've been teaching and in the training world since 1985. In that time since then, I've also spent 10 years in the Royal Navy as a trainer. And I've been teaching this course since actually April of 2001. So this April, it will be 20 years. Although I haven't kept a count, I have done an estimate of how many people I have personally taught in one context or another. And I reckon it's between 10,000 and 20,000 people over this 35-year career. And most importantly, I try to do my bit to make the world a better place for all of us and our children. So here in a nutshell, that's who Sir Tailor is. Now, since I'm not driven by profit, it's a fair question, what am I driven by? And it is a vision, this is my vision, to empower people by enhancing their love of and skills in learning and reasoning. I'm a teacher, this is why I'm a teacher. Because I believe in the power of education to improve the world and people's lives. It's all about education for me. Okay, now, the fact that you're here on a Sunday morning, some of you at very short notice, shows me that you are in fact serious. But you know, if you are serious about doing your best for your child, then I've got this point to make. Some of you may have heard of Carl Sagan. He was essentially a scientist, but he was also a writer, a poet, an author. And he was, in his life, the leading authority on the search for extraterrestrial life. And So his opinion on the subject was much sought after. So journalists would ask him, does he think there is life out there in other worlds? And his answer would always be the thinking man's answer, the scientist's answer, which is that I don't know, because we don't have sufficient evidence one way or the other, which is unsatisfying if you're looking for a headline as a journalist. So when he's pressed on the point, as he was, then he gave this reply. Because when he gave his scientist reply, the next question was, but what does your gut tell you? And this was his answer. But I try not to think with my gut. If I'm serious about understanding the world, thinking with anything besides my brain, as tempting as that might be, is likely to get me into trouble. So if you're serious about anything, you really need to put the emotion, the gut, the instinct to one side and actually use your head, think about things. And when you think about things, especially if you're trying to grasp new things, new concepts, new opinions, new ideas, and weigh them up, it requires learning, and learning requires mental work for parents as well as children. So it requires thinking new thoughts, and thinking new thoughts is creating new pathways in the brain. And some new thoughts can conflict with some old thoughts, and that can be painful. And when it does come to that, it requires us to weigh things up. Okay, now this presentation is in 4 sections, and in my opinion, they're in order of importance, starting with the most important. And what I've done is I've given you the titles of these 4 sections, not only in order of importance, but the size of the font, the text, the space it takes up on the screen is meant to be a reflection of the relative importance. They're all important, but this is about, in my opinion, their relative importance. So number 1, way up there and as big as I could fit on the screen, mind management. And then not much further down, mindset. And then significantly smaller, perspective. And much lower down and much smaller, 11 plus stuff. So let's come to the first of those, mind management. Effective mind management, that is yours and your child's, is critical to your child's flourishing. Notice what I'm saying there. I just want to make it clear. Yes, your child's mind management is important for their flourishing, but your mind management is also critical for your child's flourishing. Now, what am I talking about mind management? I'll try to make it clear. But before I do, I've got a question or two. What are some of the things that you do that you know you should not do? I can name a few of mine. Sometimes I eat foods that I know are not good for me. Sometimes I watch too much television. Sometimes I use my phone when I'm driving. Very rarely these days. Who's driving a lot anyway these days? Sometimes I go out and forget my mask, or get too close, less than 2 meters from another person in a shop. These are little things that can turn into big things, but these are examples of things that I do that I know I should not do. And then there are things that we all avoid, well, most of us, that we know we should do, such as exercise. I mean, all the gyms are shut, but that doesn't stop us exercising. Think of your own. There'll be things that you do that you know you shouldn't, things that you avoid doing that you know you should get on with. You don't have to share them with anybody, you just have something in your own mind. Then another question. slightly more difficult. Why is it that you sometimes don't do what you know is the sensible thing to do? Because, you know, sometimes even at the point of eating something that we know is bad for us, and we know that this is bad for us, we shouldn't be doing it, and we're going to regret it. Many times we do something, and even at the time that we're doing it, maybe even enjoying it, we think this is not a good thing for me to be doing. The question is, why do we do that? Why do we do that? I'm not asking you to beat yourself up. But here's the third question. Who is your biggest enemy? Now, based on the things you said to question one, what are some of the things you do which are not sensible? And question two, why do you do those things? You might be tempted to answer question three with, well, it's me. I'm my own biggest enemy. I'm the one choosing those things that are not sensible. I'm the one avoiding doing the things that I should be doing. You might say you are your own biggest enemy. And you might think, oh, well, you're just not a very good person. That's not the case. That's the good news for you, because in fact, it's not you. You're not the one who's making those choices that are not sensible. Your biggest enemy is in fact your chimp, your own chimp. And you shouldn't take offense at that. It's good news if you are aware of your chimp, that it's your chimp making those decisions. And it's bad news until today if you were not aware of your chimp. I say until today because I'm making you aware of your chimp today. So what is this chimp? Well, it's not an actual chimp. It's not an actual animal. The chimp is parts of your brain. The chimp lives in your head, but is not you. Here's an introduction.
There are three core tenets to the book. You have a chimp and a human in your head, and they want very distinct things. Your human is a simplified representation of your prefrontal cortex and some other parts of your brain that handle long-term thinking, delayed gratification, emotion control, consideration, and ethics. You also have a chimp in your brain. This is the limbic system and all the older parts of your brain, the parts of your brain that we would have had more in common with a chimp. Steve Peters separates out these parts of the brain and says that they want completely distinct things. They have entirely different motivations, and if you don't understand this and fail to put them in their appropriate places, then you will be forever in conflict within your own mind. This book is extremely simple. It has no flowery words or high concept ideas. It's plain and simple, to the point. You've got two dudes in your head, a chimp and a human. They are in conflict. You need to sort out that conflict if you want to have a happy, healthy, long life. And there is great, great power in this simplicity. Anytime you find yourself being overly emotional, reactive, sad, scared, you have to realize that your chimp is acting up. Anytime you feel hurt or jealous, it is the chimp that is in control. Realize that you are not your chimp. The chimp is like a child that you must always look after and that will never grow up. It will always remain the chimp, and you must accept it as it is. Don't control and hate the chimp. Manage and love the chimp. This requires you to listen and give it what it needs. So if the chimp is frightened, you don't just go, shut up, or ignore it, or berate it, or anything like that. You don't ignore your emotions. You don't ignore what your body is telling you. Instead, you listen, and then you find the most logical, rational solution to the problem. You must be a problem solver. And if you don't find solutions that appease the chimp and make the human happy, you will be forever miserable. If you don't make the chimp happy, if you ignore it or try to trick it, then it will take over. Your chimp needs sex, it needs a tribe, it needs love and security, and it needs territory. And you have to give it these things, amongst other things, to avoid internal conflict. You must satisfy its needs, keeping check on it like you would with a small, scared child. If you do this, then it will behave. By separating out the parts of your brain and giving them identities, it allows you to distance yourself from the more base, reactive parts of your mind, and thereby love yourself more. Where once you might say, why the hell do I always get so angry over such small, silly things? I'm such a goddamn loser. You now say, why does this get your back up? And how can we make sure this happens less in the future? What do you need, Jim? I mean, you might or might not say it in a weird fake American accent. This acceptance of all aspects of yourself is pure liberation. The vast majority of people are completely ruled by their chimps, and they don't even realize it. This makes them act in an angry, petty, possessive, egotistical way. If you keep an awareness of this, then when people act out, it allows you to have more compassion, empathy, and patience with them. You can say, hang on a second, this person is clearly ruled by their chimp. Sure, they may be doing me wrong, but far better to have some slight I can bounce back from in 3 seconds than to have an unruly chimp who is on the clock 24/7 causing mayhem and terror and destroying one's life.
So the chimp is the one that makes decisions that don't make sense. So if you're unfamiliar with your chimp, it's probably making important decisions for you and your family. Remember that there is no chimp. This is a little bit of, if you like, psychology. It's a tool to help you make better choices.
There are 3 core tenets to the book.
Again, notice he referred to the book. Again, of course, it is the Chimp Paradox. So now that you are aware of this model, and it is just a mind management model, this idea of the chimp, it's very useful. It is helpful to know when is it that you are in charge and when is it that your chimp is in charge, especially when it comes to important decisions that affect you and your family. So how do you tell? Well, I've got a little snapshot of it. You know, we like to think that we are the family person, loving and caring for the people that we are responsible for, and not this creature that we have no control over, which is like a child. So how can you recognize when the chimp is in charge? Well, here I've got it in one slide. I've tried to sum it up. On the left is the good, it's in green, and on the right is the less good, the chimp. So on the left are good ways to make decisions. Whatever decisions, I'm not talking specifically about 11+, I'm talking about any decisions, or especially important ones. So the good ways to make decisions are, well, why is this important? Whether you're talking about buying a car or applying for a job or putting your child through 11+, whatever the situation, why is this important? What are the facts? Now, of course, with any decision, there are an infinite number of facts that if you really put your mind to it, you can think of, and that's problematic for us. So we ask, well, which facts matter the most? Because we can't look at absolutely everything. We have to focus our energies. So we ask which are the important facts, which are facts that matter the most, and then which decision makes the best logical sense. That's the human way of thinking. And then on the right, this is the chimp way of thinking. So you know that it's the chimp in charge if you have thoughts like these. What are others doing? How will it make me look? What will people think? What do my urges say? What's my instinct? Back to what Carl Sagan replied. Those are all chimp ways of thinking. So it's really quite simple to know when it is that you are in charge and when it is that your chimp is in charge. And I'm recommending that when it comes to important decisions, do it the human way. Now, I'd like you to think of 1 or 2 goals that you have. Can be big goals, can be little goals. During these seminars, I normally mention that, you know, I'm constantly striving to weigh just a little less and maybe shed a few pounds. So, and over Christmas, that was not an easy thing to do. But now January is here, right? So we can kind of resolve to do something about it. So perhaps it can be a weight goal. So let's imagine that my goal is to shed half a stone in the next month. Okay, that's, you know, a modest goal, I think. So I'd like you to think of a goal that you have. It can be large, it can be small. but it's a goal that you have. Now, let's talk about goals and success. I mean, some of you might have a goal, something like this. Some people do, especially, you know, people I have contact with. Getting your child into a grammar school seems like a sensible and noble goal, doesn't it? Your child getting into perhaps a particular grammar school is surely success. I mean, you might have a grammar school which is more or less on your doorstep, and wouldn't that be handy? Well, wrong on both counts. Right now, here is a little bit of a test for you. This is a chimp reaction. If you feel indignant and say, oh, how dare you? Who do you think you are? Well, that's a chimp reaction. Whereas your human is intrigued and wonders, well, I wonder why he's saying that. What's he getting at? Well, this is what I'm getting at. I've got a little anecdote for you. That's why Rosie just came up on the screen, because this anecdote is about a pupil of mine from about 20 years ago. Her name was Rosie. And I used to teach her in the Langley Pavilion in Langley on I think on a Sunday morning. And she used to come to class with a friend. They were family friends, and they used to come to class together as well. Now, it turned out that sometime after the 11 plus was taken in 2001, I used to live in Slough at that time. I don't, I live in High Wycombe now. But I used to live in Slough at that time, and I used to shop at what used to be the Co-op in Slough, where I believe now there is a big Sainsbury's. So I was doing my weekly shop and walking around the Co-op with this trolley, and I saw at the end of the aisle Rosie and her family. And when they saw me, it was obvious that they were quite delighted, and it was because Rosie had passed the 11 plus and she was destined to go to a grammar school. And they came and congratulated me, thanked me, and it was as if they'd won the lottery. I mean, I understand that feeling because I've been through it with both of my daughters. And I felt a bit chuffed, like I'd done a good job. And so I carried on shopping with a little bit of a glow. And as I was shopping, I saw Rosie's friend, whose name I do not remember, with her family doing their shop. And the father, his complexion looked grey, and they were looking down as if there had been a death in the family. So I went over to them and I said, well, hello, how are you? What's up? You don't seem well. And they said, oh, she didn't make it through the 11 plus. And that's what was up. And at that time I thought, what are you thinking? It's just a score in a test. You're making your daughter feel like she's a failure by your ridiculous reaction to the score in this test. And they didn't, of course, they didn't realize the damage that they were probably doing to their daughter. But, you know, there is stigma, or if you don't do it right, there's stigma to not getting through the 11 plus. You can't make it a goal, because I'll come back to why you can't make it a goal, passing the 11 plus or getting into a particular grammar school. It's the most damaging thing potentially about preparing for 11 plus and going through the 11 plus, that children are at risk of being branded as failures, not just for this week or this month or this year, but that stays with them for the rest of their lives. I have met people who are sort of middle-aged, who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s even, who didn't pass the 11 plus, and it's still with them. They still talk about it. And I can see that it's had an impact on how they think about themselves. It's a real stigma. And I'm saying to you, please, please don't put your child in that position. Don't make them vulnerable to potentially having this stigma with them. You cannot set passing the 11 plus as a goal. And you cannot set getting to a particular school as a goal. Because if you do that, you're putting your child at risk. That's why. Well, okay, then what is success? Well, it depends who you talk to, depends on how you think about it, and it depends on when you ask that question. Because, you know, until this pandemic hit the world, people, I think, might not have thought about health, or at least a lot of people in the world, maybe the majority, would not have thought of health. But I think we're all a bit focused on the importance of our health since roughly, this time last year. So this wise man said, it's your health that's your real wealth. Is it happiness? Is that success? Well, this picture, I think, is quite poignant. It reminds me when I was a kid, I hope you have similar memories of actually not really having a care in the world and just being lost in the moment. And I think there's a lot in this, what it says, that two things prevent us from happiness: living in the past and observing others. Okay. I've got another clip for you to do with success.
The book is also great because it talks about how to set effective goals. Because a lot of the times, if you set a goal and don't reach it, you'll feel disappointed with yourself. But there's a way you can avoid this disappointment, and that's by setting a goal that isn't controlled by external factors. For example, you could set a goal of getting a job, but there's no guarantee you're going to get it. However, what if you change your goals to reading up on the job, learning interview techniques, and how to act the part? If you don't get the job, you can still be happy because you've achieved your goals and maximize your chance of getting.
Okay. Now, before I talk about this, how to set effective goals, excuse me, I'd like to just mention about that Rosie incident from nearly 20 years ago, more like 19 years ago. On that day, in that supermarket, I realized the danger of 11, or at least the potential danger of 11 plus. And I resolved in that moment that I did not want to be part of that, and that I would do what I could in order that children were not exposed to that danger. And that, if you like, is a good illustration of why it is that I am sitting here one Sunday morning every month talking to anybody who is prepared to listen. It's part of 11 plus education for parents. Now, you might not feel this way, but actually your child passing the 11 plus or going to a particular school is not in your control. It's not in your child's control. And with all my experience and expertise, it's not in my control either. Now, you might dispute that, but I'm going to try and show you why it isn't. The reason it isn't is because there are many factors that affect performance in a test that are not in your control. Just as you may apply for a job and you think, yes, it's in my control whether I get that job or not. No, sure, you have influence on it, but it's not in your control. Why not? Because you're not the one who makes the decision. Somebody else does. Somebody who, in the interview panel, or perhaps the group of them in the panel. You have control over what you do. You have control over which job you apply for, and you can make sure that the job you apply for, you are very well qualified for. You can have the most wonderful CV. You can practice your interview technique. You can present yourself really well. You can prepare for the interview, and so on. All of those things are in your control. But it doesn't matter how good you are, how well fitted you are to the job, how, you might be the best qualified person for all we know, but that doesn't mean you're going to get the job, because the decision is made by a human being or a group of human beings. And you may think you have a way with people, and you might have a way with people. That doesn't guarantee it either, because imagine you are on the interview panel. Sometimes you may have experienced this yourself, that you just get a feeling about a person for no reason, no reason that you can explain. They might, literally, it might be their name. It might be that they remind you subconsciously, it could be, you're not even aware of it. They remind you of somebody else, and you already have some sort of a feeling or opinion about them, and you might not even be conscious of it, and that influences your decision. This is just the way we're built. So you may think you have control over a situation, but you actually don't. It's a delusion if you think that you do. So yes, All you can do for a job is prepare to the best of your ability. But the actual decision whether you get that job or not is not in your hands. It is not in your control. And that's why it's saying good goals, if you're talking about applying for a job, is reading up on the job, learning interview techniques, how to act the part, get a really good CV, and so on. Those things are good goals. The things which are in your control are good goals. Likewise with 11 plus. Passing the 11 plus or getting into a particular school are not good goals because those are out of your control. What are good goals? Good goals are, I would say, this is my opinion now, having sound values, getting your priorities right about your child's welfare. Getting into a particular school or passing level is not necessarily the top concern when it comes to your child's welfare. If you are trying for the 11 plus, then yes, prepare thoroughly. This is for your child. Work hard, work consistently, pay attention to the most important things, learn from your mistakes. You know, these are things which are in a child's control, that they can do the work that they are set. They can learn to correct all their errors and learn from that. They can, I was about to preempt something I'm going to say later, I won't say it now. With me, my goal of shedding 7 pounds is not a good goal. You might say, well, it might be a better goal than getting a particular job or passing the 11 plus, but it's still not a good goal because losing weight is not in my control. Yes, of course, some people will tell you it is, but it isn't. I don't think it is, because I am in control of what I eat and how much I eat and how active I am. Yes, that is true. I am in control of those things. But you know, sometimes I feel like I'm really eating healthily and I'm being active, and yet I'm not shedding weight. And other times I'm not paying that much attention and I am shedding weight. So how my body responds is not entirely predictable. So I am in control of my eating and I am in control of my activity, but I am not in control of how my body reacts to that. I didn't mean to play that one again. So sensible goals, that's what that was about. Right, so how do you measure success? By the way, I want to mention another anecdote about if you think you are actually in control or about getting, you know, passing the 11 plus. There's a boy called Nikhil who I taught in about 2001 or 2. I can't remember which year, but it was one of those in the early years. And he was clearly a very academic boy, doing very well in school. And he pretty much took the 11 plus course in his stride, and everybody expected him to sail through. Now, he tried for the grammar schools in Slough because they lived in Heston. And the pass mark there is 111. It was then and it still is. He got 110. So he missed by a mark. And everybody was surprised and shocked because he was clearly academically very strong. And he'd learned everything he needed to learn. He knew plenty. He should have sailed through. He didn't. So everybody was mystified except his mum, who I spoke to subsequently because I was concerned as to how come he didn't sail through. And she shed some light on it. She told me this. She told me that she did her best to help him through the 11 plus. And that on the day of the exam, when she was taking him to sit the exam, in order to encourage and motivate him, she told him that they would go to Thorpe Park after the exam as a reward for his efforts. And it turned out that, with hindsight, it's all obvious now, isn't it? But that being a 10-year-old boy, he was so excited about the thought of going to Thorpe Park that during the exam, that's where his head was. Despite that, he scored 110. So he was really excited about the prospect of going to Thorpe Park. And this backfired on his mother, who was simply trying to do something really good. And this is the problem. Sometimes we as parents, not being experts, we do things that are unwittingly undermining us and undermining our children. And we think we're doing a good thing, and we might actually be doing the exact opposite. So how to measure success? All right. This is Professor Steve Peters. He's the author of the Chimp Paradox. And one of his quotes is to measure success in life by effort and doing your best. Then it's in your hands to succeed and be proud of yourself. So again, this book, The Chimp Paradox, I think it's such a useful tool. Remember, that's all it is. It's just a mind model, and it's a very useful tool. In fact, it's so useful that I reckon it's compulsory reading for parents, and I issue it to the parents of the children on my 11 Plus program. Now we come to mindset. Your mindset can help or hinder you in striving towards your potential, and your child in striving towards their potential. So again, what I'm emphasizing here is that not only is it your child's mindset that matters, but your mindset affects your child. What is mindset? Well, you've got, if you like, it's a continuum, growth and fixed mindset. But this video, I think, is a really nice introduction to mindset.
So check this out. Carol Dweck and her colleagues wanted to look into the impacts that praise had on children's development. So what they did is they took over 400 fifth grade students from all across the nation, and they did a...
Sorry, I might have skipped one.
Do you have a growth mindset? How do you think of intelligence? Do you think you're born with a certain level of intelligence that you can't change much? Or do you think it's something you can work on to develop and grow? Many students think that their level of intelligence is fixed, that they can't do much to change it. This can lead them to feeling that they just aren't smart enough to succeed, especially when courses get more challenging. But what if you knew that no matter who you are, through effort and effective strategies, you can develop your level of intelligence? According to Stanford University psychologist Carol Dweck, how we think about our brains actually affects how well we learn. Dweck says that people generally think with one of two different mindsets, a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. People with a fixed mindset believe that their intelligence is fixed at birth and they can't do much to change it. People with a growth mindset believe that their talents, abilities, and intelligence can be developed in different ways. And you may feel like you have a fixed mindset in some ways and a growth mindset in others. For example, you may think with a fixed mindset that you're just not a math person, but you may adopt a growth mindset with writing, music, sports, or another discipline. In fact, scientists who study the brain have found that the brain is like a muscle. It changes and grows in response to what we do. The harder we work using helpful strategies and the more challenges we face, the stronger and smarter the brain becomes. This is because the brain is made up of cells called neurons, which are connected to each other. As we learn, the number of connections between our neurons also grows. As we continue to exercise our brains, the connections between our neurons grow as well. These new and stronger connections help to make us smarter. Scientists call this concept neuroplasticity. Research shows that students who adopt a growth mindset, who believe that their brains can grow and develop through effort and challenges, actually do better in school. For these students, the goal is not to prove what they already know, but rather to learn and grow. Students with a growth mindset view challenges and mistakes not as proof that they aren't smart enough, but as opportunities to become smarter. The good news is that you can develop a growth mindset. You've taken the first step by learning about some of the science that shows you can grow your brain. The next step is to consider your mindset. If you have some areas in which you think you aren't smart, challenge yourself to learn and grow. Why should you bother? Because if you learn to develop your mindset, you'll persist longer with problems. You'll take on harder challenges and stretch your mental muscle more. You won't be as affected by setbacks, and in the end, you'll learn more. And the effects of changing your mindset can stick with you for years, since you're training your brain to think in a new way.
I can't really add to that. I think it's a really nice introduction. Now, this video, when I first saw it, I was dumbfounded. I'd like you to see, because, you know, as a parent, raised my two girls, giving lots of praise, apparently not always constructive.
So check this out. Carol Dweck and her colleagues wanted to look into the impacts that praise had on children's development. So what they did is they took over 400 fifth grade students from all across the nation, and they did a really simple yet interesting study. Here's how it went down. They gave all the kids a really, really easy nonverbal IQ test. There were 10 questions, and at the end of the test, they praised all the children in one of two ways. The first group was praised for their intelligence. So they said, wow, great job. You must be really smart at this. Now the second group was praised for their effort. So they said, wow, great job. You must have worked really, really hard at this. Now this is a really subtle difference, but the impact it had is incredible. So after praising the kids and getting them divided up into the two groups, they gave them all an option for their next test. The first option was, hey, this next test is going to be a little bit harder, but it's going to be a great opportunity to learn and grow. Now, the second option was, this next test will be similar to the first, and you will surely do well on it. Now, the interesting thing is, out of the group that was praised for their intelligence, 67% of them chose the easier option, while 92% of the kids who were praised for their effort chose the harder test. This is unbelievable to think about, how just the subtle difference in the way that they were praised had such an impact. Carol Dweck explains why this happened.
The child or adult hears, oh, you think I'm brilliant and talented. That's why you admire me. That's why you value me. I better not do anything that will disprove this evaluation. As a result, they enter a fixed mindset, they play it safe in the future, and they limit the growth of their talents. Whereas focusing on the strategies they use, the way they're stretching themselves and taking on hard tasks, the intense practice they're doing, those are the kinds of things that say to a child or an older athlete, it's about the process of growth. As a result, they don't feel, oh, if I make a mistake, you won't think I'm talented. They think, oh, if I don't take on hard things and stick to them, I'm not going to grow.
Next, Dweck and her colleagues gave all the kids a really, really difficult test. It was one that they would surely fail, but they wanted to look at how the different kids attacked this challenge. Dweck noticed that the group that was praised for effort worked harder, longer, and actually enjoyed this test more than the group that was praised for their intelligence. This group got really frustrated with this test and had the tendency to give up early. After this artificially induced failure round, all of the kids were given a third and final test. Now this test was the same level of difficulty as the first one, but check out the results. The group that was praised for their intelligence actually did worse on this test than the first one. Their average score actually dropped by 20%, while the group that was praised for their effort did significantly better, raising their average score by nearly 30%. This is a 50% difference in performance that was caused by a few subtle differences in the way that they were praised. This study shows how praise can either make or break a child's development. I mean, we all do it. We all want to be positive with the children we work with. So teachers, coaches, parents are always looking for ways to support their kids and tend to praise them quite a bit. So we need to look at research like this and realize, okay, praise is a good thing and there's nothing wrong with being positive, but we need to be very careful about praising someone's intelligence or abilities and focus more on the process and the effort that they put.
So this is really important, and just a very subtle change in the way we praise, the words we use, can make quite a difference to our child's mindset. So the essence of it is, don't praise intelligence, don't praise ability, and didn't mention it in this clip because that's not what the research there was about, but don't praise achievements and scores. Instead, praise effort, praise process, meaning that the children go about things in the right way and that they make their best effort. So that is a really important idea for everybody, but especially for us parents. We really have a duty to empower our children by encouraging, nurturing a growth mindset in them. You know, this is the second biggest factor to their flourishing as people after mind management. And for that reason, I issue this book, Carol Dweck's book, Carol Dweck, who's speaking in that clip. This book is called Mindset, and she wrote it after about a quarter of a century of research. So she's the one who coined this, the growth mindset. So I issue this book to the parent of all children on the 11 Plus program too, because I believe that there are things in there and guidance in there for parents to help their children to flourish. Okay, so we've done mind management and mindset. Those are the two most important things. The next is a realistic perspective. That is a realistic perspective on your part, allows you to apply your energies where they really count for your child. Many times I speak to parents who I know from the first thing that they say, haven't got a healthy perspective. They haven't got a realistic perspective. And that's why what happens is they obviously care a great deal about their child and want their child to flourish, but they have little idea of mind management or mindset, and they start putting a lot of emphasis and importance on other much less important things. What are, in my opinion and experience, much less important things, and that is lacking a suitable, healthy, and realistic perspective. Right, to make this point then, I've got this question for you. Who's your greatest teacher? Just think for yourself, who's your greatest teacher? When I ask you that question, who comes to your mind? I don't know what you just thought of. Right, but I've got a follow-up question to this. What knowledge, beliefs, and abilities were you born with? Think about that. Now, before lockdown, I used to run this presentation as a seminar in an actual room, in an actual big room, in a hotel, in the Marriott Hotel in Slough, Langley. And when I asked this question, some of the children, because the children used to come as well, would give the most obvious and correct answers, which is nothing at all. You knew nothing. You're born knowing nothing. You have no beliefs, but you do have abilities. Well, obviously, apart from the ability to, you know, to cry and cry in order to kind of communicate that I'm in need of attention, the greatest ability that we're born with is the ability to learn. And that's pretty much it. So no knowledge, no beliefs, and a couple of abilities, the one about being able to learn being very prominent. Now, so children are born knowing nothing and believing nothing. Now, these two things, mind management, the most important thing, and mindset, the next most important thing for our flourishing, where do we learn them? Because they're not born knowing them, so we learn them. Well, for that, let's have a look at the weekly hours for a child who's, let's say, in year 5 now, going to take their 11 plus this autumn, and how they spend their time. A week has 168 hours, 24 times 7, of which, when school is on, about 30 hours are spent in school. Of course, right now, they're all spent at home. Perhaps, again, when there was a venue, 3 hours in tuition, about, maybe 56 hours sleeping, maybe more, maybe 60, maybe nearly 70 hours sleeping, you could say. A few hours on extracurricular things. Now, of course, that's all out too. But I'm talking about during normal times. Even if you allow 70 hours for sleeping, we're still up to only about 100 hours a week. And it still leaves us with between 60 and 70 hours a week doing something else. So we're not out. We're not in school. We're not in tuition. We're not doing extracurricular. So what's going on with these year 5 children? Well, they're at home for those 70 hours. Now, these questions are designed to help us answer this. Who's your greatest teacher? Well, we actually are our own greatest teachers. And for your child at age 10, they are their own greatest teacher. They were not born their own greatest teacher, though. Their own greatest teacher, when they were born, was you, their parents. Because before the child went to school at all, had any contact with formal education, before they ever saw the nursery door, they had already learned mind management from you or the household, and they'd already learned mindset from the household. And they already had an idea, a model of themselves and their place in the world, i.e. how they look at the world. And their mind management, their mindset, and their thought, their idea, their concept of their place in the world shapes everything else in their lives. It shapes their experience of formal education and the outside world. So I reckon we are all our own greatest teachers. We spend 100% of our time in our own company, then our parents. Now, I like to think that after that, it's our children who are our greatest teachers for a number of reasons. One, they do remind us what it is to be curious. They question the things that we'd prefer not to have to justify. By the time we get to, our ages, this level, there are some things we just don't want to think about anymore, which we might have thought about in our younger days. And very importantly, they remind us how ignorant we once were and how far we've come. Now, actually, I'm going to go back to that third blue bullet point. They remind us how ignorant we once were and how far we've come. I want to elaborate a little bit on that. Sometimes when we see our children working and we see our children struggling, and it can be frustrating for us because we think, but that's so obvious, so easy. How come you don't get it? I'm sure we've done this before. I've explained this to you so clearly, so many times. How come you don't get it? And we can feel frustrated like that. But it is really useful in those times to remember that there was a time when this thing that your child is not able to do or understand, there was a time when you also weren't able to do that thing or did not understand that thing. Now, you might not remember that time because it would have been a long time ago, but there was a time when you yourself didn't know that thing or understand that thing. And look at you now, mum and dad, look at you now. Look at how wonderful your knowledge and understanding are. Look how far you've come from a know-nothing to what you are now. Well, you know, that should fill you with great hope for your child and make me feel a little less frustrated with your child when you see them struggling with something that seems so obvious and basic. And very importantly, they're not cynical about the world yet and need never be. I mean, I think cynicism is learned. So for your child's flourishing at age 10, I think that the influence or the control is split 50, 40, 10. 50% at age 10 is with the child themselves, 40% is with the parent, and 10% is the rest of the world, including formal education. So within that 10% is their school, their tuition, and everything else that they do outside of the home. Now, this is really important to recognize, because when I speak with some parents, many parents, they are putting so much importance on tuition, which tuition, room or Zoom, this company or that company. So which school will my child go to? As if it's a life or death thing, which it isn't. As if it's make or break for your child's flourishing, which it isn't. And forgetting a big part of that 90%, which is in the hands of the child and the parent, the household, in other words, the 90%. And they neglect big parts of that 90% and focus so much on the 10%. And that's not a healthy perspective. Because very often it's the mind management and the mindset that gets overlooked. In short, neither the academic flourishing of your child nor their flourishing as a person relies on which school or which university they go to. I know we have preferences, that's a different matter. This is good news because actually it should be empowering to you. It does mean that it's a lot more in your hands and your child's hands than it is in the hands of formal education. Okay, now pay and absolve. You know, I mentioned earlier that I know nothing about motor mechanics. I also know nothing about IT and fixing computers, software, all that nonsense. Sorry if you're an IT person, I didn't mean to say nonsense. It just doesn't make sense to me, that's all. So when I have a problem with my car, I take it to the garage and I say, I've got this problem, can you fix it? And they'll say, right, Mr. Taylor, we'll have a look and give you a call back. And they give me a call back. And most of it doesn't register quite because I don't know enough about it. I say, okay, how much is it going to cost? They say, okay, go on then, fix it. And they fix it and I pay them. And my car works fine. Likewise, if I have a problem with my computer, I take it to a repair shop and they say, okay, we're going to have to do this, this, and this. And I say, fine, go ahead. They fix it, I pay them, and that's it. So I pay and absolve myself of all responsibility for it. And that's the way we do many things. We can't be experts in everything. But you know, you may not be a teacher, but you can't do that with your child's education. You cannot leave your primary, I'm talking about at this level, you cannot leave your primary school child with a tutor and leave them to it, because at this age, the overlap between parenting and teaching is too great. Mind management and mindset especially, their importance is too great to your 10-year-old child. You can't just do that. So it isn't like, in my case, leaving my car at a garage or my computer at a repair shop. Of course, when children grow up and they're adults, it's different. Then they're almost 100% in control of their own flourishing by that stage. I'm talking about a 10-year-old. Right, so you're here because you want the best for your child. Now notice I've put in red, the best for your child. Well, if you do want the best for your child, then don't compare them. Don't compare them with anyone, not with their brother or sister, especially not with their brother or their sister, but not with anybody else, not their school friend, not their cousin, not their grandfather, not you, not their other parent. Don't compare them with anybody. Comparison is unkind. You may think, oh, but I compared them favorably. Well, that's unkind too. Surely, if your child is worthy of praise and recognition, it's in their own right and not in relation to another person. So comparison, whether it's favorable or not, then is unkind. It's also often manipulative, and it stifles the human. It appeals to the chimp, not the human. The only person you should try to be better than is the person you were yesterday. So if you do want to compare your child, compare them to themselves a year ago. You can say, you know what, a year ago you didn't know your 5 times table, and look at you now. Because children are learning machines. We all are actually, but especially children. They're learning machines. They have a great deal more knowledge, more skills, more awareness, better understanding of concepts than they did a year ago. And you can point it out to them. Then they can see the evidence of their efforts. And that's really encouraging. So if you do want the best for your child, then don't compare them to anybody else. Back to the question. So you want the best for your child. Right. Well, there is a tradition especially in Asian cultures, I'm sure in many others too, but it's a culture that I was raised in, so I'm aware of that and I'm speaking from that, where as soon as a child shows any academic promise, they're going to be a doctor. They're going to grow up to be a doctor. And I've been through that myself. I didn't grow up to be a doctor. I grew up to be a teacher. And I'm very glad I did, because I would have been a terrible doctor. But I like to think that I'm the best teacher that I can possibly be. But what is best for your child? Best for your child depends on who your child is. So you have to know their sort of what actually appeals to them, what actually fits their talents and their interests, their aptitudes, their natural inclinations, and value them for who they are, if you want the best for your child. Here's a catch. This is probably the most important thing that I'll say to you. That's why it's so gaudy, so you don't miss it. But it needs a little bit of elaboration. I'm going to read it. This is a pitfall to watch out for as parents of young children. Your child's desire to please you, now, let me just clarify that. You might not feel like your child wants to please you. They might seem rebellious and disobedient and what have you. You may feel that. But trust me, they want nothing more in the world than to please you. Deep down, that's what they want. So your child's desire to please you can mislead you into believing that they want what you want from them, causing you to make choices that undermine their flourishing as human beings. What I mean is this. Look, let's take this example I said. Many times parents, as soon as they see their child's academic promise, they say, oh, she's going to be a doctor when she grows up. He's going to be a doctor. They say that in front of the child, or in earshot of the child, and they mention it to their friends, and it's a talking point, and the child is aware of it. So the child tries to comply to please their parents, and they say, yes, I'm going to be a doctor when I grow up. But is that really what they wanted? They may be saying it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's what they want. So, you're kind of planting a seed, and it might not be the right one for your child. So watch out. They may go along with it. That doesn't necessarily mean it's what they really want. So be wary of wishing your child or trying to turn them into someone they are not. You cannot do that. without stifling your child's true self. And they need to be their true selves in order to flourish. Now, that leads me into the fact that grammar school is not a good place for every child. So who is it good for? It's really quite straightforward. The expectations and workload in a grammar school are appropriate for children who have high academic potential. How high, you say? Well, potential that puts them in roughly the top 25% most academic children, the top quarter. And the 11+ test is designed to select those children. Now, it doesn't always succeed, but on the whole it does. For other children, that is, children who are not particularly academic, grammar schools are likely to be overwhelming and damaging. If your child is academically about average or only slightly above average in their academic abilities, grammar school would probably be a really horrible place for them to be. Why? Well, you might think, no, it's still better than a normal school. No, it isn't. Not for that child. Not for that child. Because a child who somehow scrapes into a grammar school when their academic ability is about average, and it does happen, it used to happen more, but the exams have improved, so it happens a bit less. But if such a child does go to a grammar school, they're going to have a terrible time at school because they're going to be struggling to keep up, and they're always going to be the bottom of the class, and they're going to know it, and everybody in their class is going to know it. So throughout the rest of their childhood, that's what they're going to be. They're going to be the bottom of the class, the child who isn't able to understand the slow coach. That's a horrible place for such a child to be. Right, now I come to the 11+ stuff itself, i.e. the technical stuff, the syllabus, if you like, or the other things that you need to learn. And sometimes I ask, what is most important in order to be ready for the 11+? And when I ask this question in a seminar, in a live seminar, people say to me, well, it's exam techniques, it's the speed, it's the vocabulary, things like that. And then I felt really disheartened because I was hoping for something that was more accurate. Yes, exam techniques are important. Speed is important. Vocabulary is, although those things are necessary, but they're nowhere near the most important thing. So here's a wake-up call if you were thinking that it's those things. English is ace, king, and queen. I'm thinking of a deck of cards, the top cards, ace, king, queen. It is English. That is the most important thing. And that's regardless of which 11+ you're talking about. Doesn't matter who sets the paper. Some people are thinking, oh, right, look, do you prepare children for CEM or do you prepare children for GL? Actually, they're just boards. They're testing the same things. It doesn't matter who sets the paper. Some grammar schools and some papers, they are set by the school themselves. And CEM and GL are not the only exam providers. There are other exam providers. It doesn't matter because they're testing the same things. So if that doesn't matter, why do grammar schools disclose the name of the organization that sets the test papers? By the way, they don't all disclose this information, but most of them do. So why do they disclose it if it's not important? Why do they disclose the outline format of the test if it's not important? Well, the answer's in the question, because it's not important. It's not really telling you anything. It's pretending to tell you something, but it's actually telling you nothing. It's trivial information, that's why they give it. They're testing the same skills and knowledge, and so do all the rest. And what is it that's being tested? Well, primarily literacy, reasoning with language, knowledge of and skills with British English. This is about 75% of the test. Notice British English, as opposed to American English, Indian English, South African English, Australian English. There are many varieties of English and they all differ from one another by a small percentage, some more than others. Now, the most tricky one is American English. The reason is because it's so pervasive. It's around us. It's in media. It's on the internet. It's in books. And it's difficult to know. There are only a few telltales sometimes when you're reading something written by an American author that give away that, oh, this is written in American English, not British English. And it's usually the spellings of some words. But the 11 plus is in British English. And it's that children need to develop their mastery of as much as they can. Now I say this is about 75% of the test. Of course, 11 plus tests vary in what papers they contain and the exact structure of the test, not so much in the skills that they're testing. But how can it be 75%? I mean, if you look at many areas like Kent, Birmingham, Slough area, Berkshire, they all have papers set by CEM where there are 3 subjects: verbal reasoning or English, maths, and non-verbal reasoning. And the verbal reasoning, all the language aspects, are weighted at 50%. So how can it be 75% of the test? Well, it is, at least, because look, your child can be a whiz at maths, but they can be a whiz at maths and not get a good score in a maths test because the questions are all in, yeah, you guessed it, English. So they have to first understand the information given in the question, and of course, then understand the question itself. Then they can apply their wizardry in mathematics to solve the problem. But it requires a good understanding of English first. The exam itself has written instructions on it. The paper itself has written instructions and examples. And when the exam is conducted, the instructions are given by the invigilator, and in some cases, their recorded instructions are played on a CD. All of that is in English. So the instructions have to be understood clearly, written and spoken. Even in the non-verbal, the instructions are all in English. So I reckon that the 11 plus test, 75% of the marks rely on a mastery of English. So literacy is by far the most important subject when it comes to 11 plus tests. It's not that the other subjects are not important, it's just giving you a realistic perspective on it and what to prioritize when it comes to the technical things. The syllabus work. Numeracy, of course. And I think all the 11 plus tests I know of, they contain some numeracy. But that tends to be perhaps a quarter, weighted at a quarter. And then many 11 plus tests contain test of spatial skills, non-verbal reasoning. Not all do, but most do. Reasoning with shapes, knowledge of shapes, observation, spatial skills. So those are the subjects, if you like: literacy, numeracy, and spatial skills. Literacy being by far the most important subject. What's being tested in addition, of course, is the ability to understand and follow instructions. Speed is being tested, and that's unfortunate, but it is being tested. And ultimately, any test is testing the ability to perform well in tests. And I think we probably all know somebody you might be that person, who's just really good at tests. And other people who are very knowledgeable, very well educated, and they're just not good in tests. Now, what is needed in order to prepare for a test like that? Well, first of all, an excellent syllabus. The children need to be taught well. I do all the teaching, by the way, on my programs, 11 Plus and Foundation. I do it via video lessons. They need to ask and be asked a lot of questions, because that interaction really makes children think. It's about thinking and explaining their specific queries. They need feedback and guidance on their learning. This, by the way, is only possible in a small group, because that's why I keep my group small, because when I have a small group, I can interact with every child, every lesson, and I can observe things that they're getting, things that they're struggling with. They need suitable practice resources, which of course are available in abundance. They need someone to turn to when they have questions, and above all, they need your support. And you, the parent, need someone to guide you in how to support your child's learning. That's why I'm here. So since English is the most important thing, British English, how do you improve it? How do you improve the mastery of it? Well, there are many, many things. And I think pretty much all of them are free. Children could read at least 30 minutes daily, preferably an hour a day when there is no school. When they do read, it should be a mixture of fiction and non-fiction. When they read fiction, they should read a variety of genres and authors. The variety is really important because when they read a variety and they read a lot, what they're doing is they're exposing themselves to such a great variety of usage of English, so many different contexts and such different preferences of language, because every author has their particular style, so many styles of expressing ideas that they just, without really consciously working at it, they are becoming very skillful at quickly understanding not only the usage of English, but also at reasonably bringing to life the scenario that's being talked about. Non-fiction, I'm thinking of encyclopedias, newspapers, magazines, internet articles, and the like. Now, this is quite important. Sometimes I come across children who are very good at understanding English, written or spoken, but they are really not very good at expressing themselves. They can't seem to find the words to say what they want to say. So they have this thought in their head, but they just can't string the words together to express it. That can happen because finding the words to express thoughts is a skill. And the skill that they've developed is the skill of understanding English, spoken and written. So they've developed that skill through practice. But what happens is they've underdeveloped the skill of finding the words and expressing themselves, expressing their own thoughts. And that can easily happen. Just think about it like this. Children speak most within the home, with family, and with their school friends at school. When children speak with their school friends, children, they have their own language. They're not necessarily expressing themselves in a formal, accurate way that we would be satisfied with. So they have their own language that they're using to talk with their friends. And then in the home, I mean, who knows what your child is trying to say better than you yourself? You know, you know what your child is trying to say. They don't need to find the words to express themselves clearly. So they don't, because they know they're going to be understood. Very often they don't need to finish their sentence because you know what they're trying to say. And that tends to happen within the home because, you know, it's not necessary to say exactly what you mean. So let's not, you know, be difficult about it. I understand what you mean. Yes, let's do this. But the issue with it is that because they don't have to practice expressing themselves clearly, then they don't develop that skill. So it's not that they don't have the ability to do it. There's nothing wrong with them. It's just that they haven't practiced that skill. So that's why I say in this bullet point, insist that your child speaks in sentences, not necessarily all the time, but I'm saying, you know, sometimes, every day, get them to express themselves exactly, finding the right words. And don't finish their sentences for them. Because if they don't have to finish their sentences, they're not actually learning to start sentences in a way that they can actually finish. And it's a skill that needs to be developed. And by the way, that skill is especially important for creative writing. So if you're looking at preparing your child for an 11+ test that contains creative writing, they really need to practice this skill of finding the words to express themselves clearly. When it comes to learning vocabulary, it's better to learn words in context as often as possible. Of course, it's not always possible, but that's the preferred way, because then you get to see them in use, so you appreciate their usage better. Of course, you can only learn a few new words every day. If you try to learn, 100 words in a day, you'll probably end up confusing yourself. So a few words, but every day. And if your own English is a little suspect, and I know many of you may not have English as your first language, then actually working on your own English can encourage your child to work on theirs. If it's good enough for mom and dad. So you need to be a good role model, or your child needs you to be a good role model of learning, reading, mind management, a growth mindset. I mentioned reading in that list because, I'm a big advocate of children doing a lot of reading, not only children. And children tend to look at their parents and think, well, if it's good enough for my mom or my dad, then it's good enough for me. So you have to say, if you are telling your child read, and yet they never see you reading, then it can feel to your child like, oh, you're being a hypocrite. And you can't really get away with saying, do as I say, not as I do. If you do want your child to believe in persevering with efforts to learn, let them see a worthy example to follow. So, it really helps them if you yourself persevere with efforts to learn. Because you don't have to learn the same things they're learning, but we're all learning all the time. So if you're choosing tuition, supposing your child is a particularly academic child and that grammar school would indeed suit their learning needs, then fantastic, I'm your man. Prepare them for 11 plus, prepare them really well. And then make sure that, you optimize their learning, not testing. Of course, testing, ultimately they're preparing for a test, so they do need to prepare for that. But how well the child can perform in a test isn't determined. The ceiling is not determined by their exam technique. It's determined, the ceiling is set by their level of learning. I would recommend that the group needs to be small so that the children can have interaction, and so that the tutor can have knowledge about your child's learning needs and can communicate them. That the tutor marks some of the work, because that sheds a different kind of light on the child's learning needs and their understanding. And for my classroom-based program, which unfortunately is not able to run at the moment, I do have a money-back guarantee, which is on principle that I believe in what I do. Now, here are some red flags. If you're seeking tuition and you see these things, there should be a big question mark. If they pack more than 12 people in a room, you have to think, is this really about education? I would suggest not. If they give a pre-test before accepting pupils onto the program, that, in my opinion, is an admission of not being able to teach or to teach effectively. In a way, it's a little bit like the grammar schools themselves, because what the grammar schools are doing when they give the 11 plus test is they're attempting to cream off the top 25% of children. And then when those children excel in their GCSEs and A-levels, they say, oh, look, what a fantastic school we are. It's a little bit like that with tuition too. That if they cream off the most academic children and then say, hey, look how great our children did in the 11 plus tests, it's a bit of the same thing. If the tutor doesn't mark any homework, I think something's missing. If you yourself do not have access to the learning, you have one hand tied behind your back, because this is a common experience with parents, is that their child comes home from tuition and they get stuck on something. Now, you as the parent want to help your child, support them as much as you can, but you weren't in the lesson. So you don't know how it was explained to the children. Now, you yourself have an explanation, but you don't know that it is in keeping with the explanation the children were given. So you don't want to confuse your child by showing them a different way. So you're reluctant. And that's what happens when you yourself don't have access to the learning. With my programs, parents have access to all the learning because the learning, the teaching is done by me via video lessons, and the children have access to the learning, and so do you. If the focus is on testing instead of learning, that's upside down. Or it's on the volume of work instead of the quality of work. Or if they stoke up hype about techniques, test scores, CEM and GL, and they try to make the differences seem big about mocks. If they're bigging up those things, what they're really doing is taking your eye and the children's eye off the ball, which is the actual learning. A little plug, the values expressed in this presentation are encapsulated in my courses. We use highly interactive small group format. We value optimizing our collaboration with you. We do that in a number of ways. First of all, you have access to all the learning. You also have access to all the scores that we collect for your child and a performance graph. You also are able to exchange written feedback with the learning coach who teaches your child live lesson. Also, anybody who's on the program can at any time arrange a Zoom consultation with me. And I'm very happy to help parents if I possibly can. And many times I actually work with children on a one-to-one basis. This is all part of the program if they just really need a boost with something specific. So I regard it as a collaboration between us because that's exactly what it is. The 11 Plus course is so effective. I mentioned it already that it comes with a money back guarantee, but that's the one that's run in a venue, which unfortunately is not possible at the moment. The foundation course is a really good stepping stone onto the 11 Plus course because the 11 Plus course is very demanding. There's no getting away from it. It has to be. And the foundation course is a really useful stepping stone to it. It's not absolutely essential, but it is useful. And we run lessons in various locations. I've put Hayes Langley, but of course, right now, not. But we do make our courses available via Zoom. So you can access them from anywhere as long as you have internet. Now, sometimes parents are very concerned about having Zoom lessons. So I want to just address this issue about Zoom versus Room. The programs that I run, in fact, whether you do the distance learning course, which means live lessons are via Zoom or not, it's actually the same course. The difference is literally how do the children access their live lesson. And the live lesson itself is only about 25% of the program. Most of the learning, the work is done between live lessons. So let's look at the distance learning course. It means the live lessons are via Zoom. I mean, it's self-evident, I think, that it's convenient and it's safe. It saves you time, it saves you money, and it saves you worry. The standard course where the live lessons take place in a room, the tutor has greater scrutiny of the children and their work. That's pretty much it. But you know, with the live lesson, it does mean you have to get ready, travel, sign your child in, go home maybe, come back, wait in the queue to sign your child out, and so on. So, you know, there's a lot in favor of distance learning, but yeah, I'm finding that a lot of people, because I suppose we grew up with only one kind of teaching, and that was in person in a room, and that's all we know. And it's difficult to kind of see beyond that. All right. Now, this is a fair question. Why is it that sometimes children just don't score well in the 11 Plus test? And here are some popular suspects. They didn't do enough mock tests. I'm not saying these are the actual reasons, but this is what many parents say to me. They didn't use the right practice papers, not enough practice papers. They should have gone to this tuition and not that tuition. They didn't have good exam technique. They should have done their lessons in a room and not via Zoom. But they are rarely the true culprits. Okay, so all of these are not really the answer to this question. So what is the real answer to that question? I think it should be kind of obvious. What is the number one reason then that children don't do well in 11+ tests, and what can you do about that? Well, it's a lack of love, not love from you, but a lack of love of learning for its own sake. A kind of utilitarian means to end approach to learning, something a bit cynical. A lack of love of learning, especially with many children, lack of love of learning English, mastering English, trying to reduce it to a set of techniques. And what you can do about it, well, I've just explained a whole screen's worth of things you can do in order to improve English. But the lack of love of learning, you can address it by having a different outlook on learning. Replace the means to an end view with this love of learning for its own sake value. Encourage, praise, acknowledge, and model a love of learning English. Learning in general, but especially English, if English is not your first language. In short, practice and nurture a growth mindset. So a growth mindset makes any situation kind of a learning situation, and that is a great asset to your child. Now, some months ago, I was doing a consultation with a parent who was thinking about putting his daughter onto my foundation program. And I gave him lots of information and explanation and answered lots of questions. And then he asked me, what was your pass rate last year? And I told him, quite proudly actually, that 90% of the children passed. And I thought he was going to be impressed with that. But he came back with, why did 10% fail? And I thought, I was a bit taken aback because I was expecting him to be impressed with that, because actually that was an especially high pass rate. So I thought, well, I must address this. Why is it then that not every child can pass? Well, first of all, I've already mentioned that that's the way the test is designed, that by definition, 3/4 of children don't get to pass, because the point of the test is to cream off the top 25%. And not all children can be in that top 25%, no matter how much effort they put or how well they were taught. Yes, children can grow, but there is still a limit. Poor mind management skills. Now that can be on the part of the parents and or the children. Poor mind management skills, feeling lazy, getting distracted, anxious, getting exam nerves, tricking themselves that, this test is something more than just a chance to show what you can do. Poor mind management skills. Fixed mindset, making it about passing, the result, rather than about the learning. A lot of learning opportunities are missed by approaching the course through a fixed mindset. Lack of a foundation, the basics just aren't there. Basic concept of number, for example, is lacking, and that handicaps children with all their mathematics. Likewise with language. You can't learn language in a classroom. It doesn't matter how many lessons you have in a year. Language is learned over a lifetime and through immersion. And if children and parents just haven't been paying attention to English, they can't expect to suddenly become really good at English during the course of the foundation and the 11+ program. In some cases, for various reasons, parents just aren't in a position to support their children. and a certain amount of parental support is necessary. And sometimes everything else was right. They had the potential, they knew all the things they needed to know, they had all the skills and lots of parental support, they had a good outlook, and they just had a bad day. That can happen. Sometimes they're just not cut out. That's going back to number one, actually. Some children, most children, in fact, 3 out of 4 children are not cut out for grammar school. Here's a summary. Flourishing requires effective mind management and a growth mindset. They're the 2 most important things. Perspective 50-40-10, give due attention to the overwhelmingly important role of child and parents in the relative insignificance of schooling and tuition. Many people have that back to front, many parents I speak to. A mastery of English is paramount in 11+ tests. And if you're looking at tuition, I highly recommend small group tuition that maximizes engagement and learning rather than testing. I have a request. I've come to the end, by the way. Please, if you found any of the insights or the things that I say, or you happen to share the values that I've expressed, do tell your friends. We do rely largely on word of mouth of such people as yourself. Tell your friends. Time's running short to prepare children for this year's 11+. Even if your child is in year 4 now, it's a great time for them to join the foundation program because it'll be good preparation for the 11+ program. They don't start next month. Please ignore that bit. If you have a friend who is thinking about preparing their child for 11+, please recommend them to come to one of my presentations. There'll be another one next month. I haven't set the date just yet. Or they can talk to me at any time. They just call up the support team and say, I'd like a consultation, please, with Mr. Tailor. And I'll happily answer any questions that they have. We do have an autumn offer for children who are joining the course late, having missed the autumn term. I'm trying to make it as convenient as possible for those children to catch up with the learning that they have missed. With this autumn offer, what we do is we provide free access to the video lessons and the worksheets that were issued in the autumn term. On the foundation course, this means we are waiving a charge of £144. And on the 11+ course, it means we're waiving a charge of £309. This is so that the children have free access to the learning. Of course, it requires a great deal of time and effort on their part, and some on yours, of course. But the resources are there if the determination is there. Books were issued during the autumn term on both courses. You would pay for those, but that is a small cost in relation to what you're saving on the other resources. The reason you need the books is because I'm still setting work from them. In short, your child and you have free access to a whole term's worth of learning. This is the autumn offer. So it's not too late to join, not the 11+ course, not the foundation course. It's tough, of course, for children to be coming in partway through the course. They're a little bit in at the deep end, but if they're reasonably capable, they certainly can keep up, and they can catch up over a period of many weeks. I would say they could realistically catch up by the end or sometime in April, because they do have a couple of school holidays. They've got the spring half term and then the end of term holiday also. I have an end thought, which is this: every parent has the chance to make the world a better place by the example they set for their children. What's the alternative?